Okay, let's get started. This is the very last day of the Oracle class. This is our final mini lecture, because it's not even going to be that long, actually, so you get to go home early. Because I decided not to cover the last lecture because it's not on the final exam. So instead, I'm going to go directly into the final exam review and tell you everything you need to know for the final exam, the format, what to study for. And what you're looking at on the screen is the schedule. You guys are the first ones. You're on 418. Actually, you're not really. There's the weekend class has got their object-oriented design in Java first. But if you haven't discovered it yet, the exam schedule has been posted. It's on bhecker.com. If you don't like the 18th, Monday the 18th, you may take it any of the other times that are available. Just send me a message so I know, and I can arrange to have you take this exam at any one of these other times. There's 2 weekends. There's 16th, 17th weekend, which is also graduation weekend, this coming up weekend, which is kind of interesting. So we'll see how this works out. And then we also have the 30th and the 5th. If you wait till the 30th and the 5th, you're going to get a huge crowd. Lots of people are scheduling for the 30th. Because what? It's almost a month away or something. Nah, not really. It's about 2 weeks away. So that's a popular day as well. So on the website, I don't have internet access right now, so I can't pull up the bhecker.com website. But I have this posted out there. And it's going to be, along with that, I'm going to post the recording of this lecture I'm doing right now. And the purpose of today is to go through and tell you everything that you need to study for the final exam. All right, so I wrote new exams for everything. This class has been taught before, but you have a brand new exam. And like most new exams that get written, they end up being completely unique. This one's unique in that it actually covers a lot of SQL and a lot of entity relationship and a lot of database concepts. Doesn't really cover very much about Oracle. But as I mentioned before, every exam is a little bit unique, so this one ended up being unique. Of all of the exams I wrote this term, this one also ended up being the most difficult. It is worth 20 points. Although there are 25, there's only 20 questions on this. That's a typo. There are only 20 questions on the exam, not 25. Can you guys keep it down so I don't have to yell over you? Okay. Hello? It's way too much chatter in the back. I can't talk over you. All right, so that's the first correction right there. There's only 20 questions on it. It is only worth 20% of your grade. So it's 5% less than any of the other exams. It'll take you about the same amount of time. However, I am in looking at, and when I wrote this exam and I walked away from it, I went, uh-oh, that's a hard exam. The exam is extremely challenging. However, if 50% or more of the class misses a particular question, I'm going to toss the question out. Which means if it's as hard as I think it is, don't take it out on me. Dismiss it. Get it wrong. And hope everybody else got it wrong too. Because then I'll toss it out. Of the exam, there's 4 different sets. And there are 2 questions that are similar among all 4 sets. I should say 2 sets of questions that are similar. The set of questions is about 3 questions that are combined together that are similar amongst the 4 sets, but they're different questions. And then there's about less than half of it that's unique per each test. So some of the questions you're going to get, and I was going to say, study all this stuff. I'm going to tell you everything. However, you may not necessarily get a question on normalization. You might not necessarily get a question on joins or something. It depends on what version of the exam you get as to exactly what you're going to see. I will tell you, though, there's a lot of SQL on it. And here's the other part that makes the exam difficult. Instead of it being just one correct answer, it's the select all that apply formats. And in terms of the select all that apply format, you're looking at queries, you're looking at statements, you're looking at solving a problem. The sets of 3 that are on each one of them is a scenario in which you're given a database scheme, you're given the data in the database, you're given a bunch of queries, and you're asked questions about the results. The queries, I will tell you, are terrible. And I'm going to say it's terrible, it's terrible, it's terrible. When you get there, you're going to expect the worst. But it's not going to be that bad. You're not going to, hopefully, it's not going to be that bad. And if it is, don't worry, I will also curve the results of this exam. So not only, if everybody, more than 50% of people miss a particular question, the question is going to be thrown out completely. The exam will be curved as a class. So if the highest score is 5, that's an A. And then, it'll go down from there. But the highest score is not going to be 5. The highest score is probably going to be between 15 and 16, 17. That's what I'm thinking. It's challenging, but you might actually appreciate a challenging exam. I could rewrite it, but I left it as being challenging because it will tell you it's a nice graduate level challenging exam. This is a graduate level course, so it'll definitely be an eye opener to some people who may not necessarily be prepared for it. With all that said and done, let's talk about the exam. What makes it difficult? Well, let me tell you subject by subject what it is you need to know. And it's not so bad, actually, when you think about it. All right. Key components of a database. Now, an easy exam would ask you about rows and columns. A hard exam is going to ask you about constraints. So assertions. We had an SQL bootcamp lecture that I did in the three parts, actually. I think it was lecture 5. That's a must. That's a bare minimum. You need to review that bootcamp lecture. So the lecture is called SQL Bootcamp. It's about 166 slides or so. That's a good starting point. Because you need to know how to do those queries, all of the queries. Nested queries, so a query that uses a nested query. You got to be familiar with the joins. In fact, there's another lecture that was done right after that. It was one that I actually kind of skipped through because you guys didn't want to hear about joins. They went through cross joins, outer joins, inner joins. There are at least 2 questions, and one of the biggies is on the join concept. So to tell you more specifically, and maybe I figure if I give enough of this away, it won't be so hard anymore either. You're considering a relation, and you're looking at 2 sequences of queries that exist on this relation. And then you're asking questions about the results of those queries, how they're similar and how they're different. And they're doing joins. So what makes it hard is that I'm not telling you from a theoretical point of view, what's the difference between an outer and an inner join or natural join or cross join. I'm not asking you that. Instead, I'm giving you a couple of queries that you have to look at, and you have to know what the query is doing in terms of the structure of this join. And then you're comparing the results that are happening from some sample data that's given to you. That's what makes it difficult, is because you actually have to apply it. So the application of it, and actually I like the question. Actually, it's not a bad way of questioning. But it's definitely looking at, instead of concepts and theory, the application of it. Which means you have to look at a query and know that what's happening with that query. Another type of question along the same lines is looking at something that that uses a check. So, not to totally give it away, look at and know the different types of joins that can be performed and the results of what happens when those joins are performed. How to do a check on a value when it's entered in. In fact, we did that in Joe's Bar. Check to see if the price was, don't let the beer go into the table unless the price is above $5 or something like that. One of the queries is going to have a check in it. One of the queries is going to be, well, two of the queries are going to have two different types of joins. It's going to ask you to analyze the output of the results of those two joins. You're going to need to know what those joins are doing. The third part, and these are two separate sets. So you're given a table, you're given some data in the table, and you're given the structure, and then you're asked to answer questions about it. The third part of it is working with an assertion, create assertion. Another one of these queries is a view. It's creating a view, and it's doing something with a view. Remember when I talked about views? Actually, I talked about assertions as well. It's all going to be in that SQL Bootcamp lecture. Know that you can't do everything possible to a view. You know, you can query a view. Can you always update a view when it's working with more than one table? The little things about the concept of the view, little things about the concept of doing a check or an assertion where you're doing a check. And the exist, the not exist, the in, the not in, the between, that all the little intricate pieces of that SQL Bootcamp lecture, heavily tested. I'm not quite sure why I went that route, but that's how it turned out. So let's see. That believe it or not, you're going to spend probably most of the majority, the bulk of the exam on about 4 different questions. And then the rest of them are easy. That's why I say it's to your advantage if everybody misses it. Because if more than 50% miss the question, it's going to be thrown out. So, and plus I'm going to curve it anyway. And so that's really just the issues about 3 or 4 of those questions. But 3 or 4 of those questions is going to bring your grade down from 20 points to 16. That's why I say most of you are going to get 15, 16 points on it. If the highest grade is 16, 16 turns into 20, and I curved the rest of it down. And those people who got 16 will end up getting an A on it, if everybody misses those 4 questions. So. Or even if they don't miss the 4 questions and I curve it. So the average grade is going to be in a low B category, and the 16 points is going to be like 80% out of 20-ish. If I have my percentage right, I don't know, I'm just doing that in my head. Okay, so let me get back to the contents of the exam. What are we looking at? Components of databases. What are components? Tables, views, assertions, the concept of the constraint, primary keys, foreign keys, different components, characteristics of the database management system. Nothing on backups and recovery or security. And believe it or not, I left out privileges completely. I didn't even mention anything about granting privileges or revoking privileges or anything of that nature. Not even creating user accounts or assigning roles. Nothing on roles, nothing on privileges. I'm sorry? There are tons of questions in which you have to look at SQL queries. However, you don't have to write one. And you just came in, so you missed everything I just said, but majority of the exam is consisting of queries that are demonstrating different characteristics of the database that you have to actually know what the query is doing in order to answer the question. So. All right. There are some easy questions regarding, actually there's some easy questions regarding the components of the database system as well. You know, about good 2/3 of the exam are easy questions, I should say. It's just that little bit that's going to be difficult. What we're looking at are normalization questions. There's questions that relate to basic SQL syntax. There's some that relate to the joins, as I mentioned before. Some that relate to the different features I mentioned before. Database management system, why is one better than storing information in a text file or Excel file? There's a couple of like lightweight, easy. That would call those the easy questions. You know, why do you want to use a database? Kind of thing. You know, what's Oracle good for? You know, not that actually, but something more along the lines of the purpose or the utility of the database in terms of its consistency, what it's offering in terms of services. Basic syntax components, for example, the select from, where. That's kind of misleading. You're not going to see too much basic stuff. The SQL queries are extremely advanced, and I'm being honest. So, which hopefully you look at that SQL lecture, that bootcamp lecture, and look at the advanced stuff. You know, every one of these has got like an exist, you know, in part of it, and then it's got more than one query inside of the query. So it's definitely up a notch, but it doesn't mean it's not something that, you know, I don't want you to pick up the exam and go, wow. You know, prepare for you ahead of time. You're still going to be shocked. You're still going to go, whoa. I guarantee it, every one of you. I'll put money on that one. But at least I think you probably, if you keep an open mind, you probably will get them right, actually. So, because, you know, you always put in some of these obvious multiple choice questions that, you know, the answers are totally wrong completely. You know, you'll get those. So you just narrow it down to one or two. So, and it is multiple choice. So you have that guessing factor as well. All right, not to continue with the ugliness. Primary key, foreign key. Yeah. In a query, know how to say something is a primary or a foreign in terms of the constraint written into the table create. So that's when I say, you know, I'm not going to ask you, what's a primary key? What's a foreign key? Which is the point I'm trying to make, is it goes way beyond the surface level. So think about if you were to put a database constraint in to make something a foreign key, which one of these, you know, of the above queries is going to provide that? And then you look at the queries and you go, you know, and most of you, can I specify it as a foreign key? Yes, you can. When you create a table, you can say something as a primary, you can say something as a foreign key. You can say something is unique. You could say, you know, you could put a check in there. You could put a constraint on there. You can create, you know, use SQL to create a table. You can use SQL to create a view, to create an assertion. And every single one of those concepts is tested. That, believe it or not, is the bulk of the exam. And I don't know why it laid heavy that way. So, past that, the rest of it, the 16 questions, the other questions you got, and I shouldn't say it's the bulk, it's the hardest part of the exam, it's the smallest portion though. Beyond that, what you're looking at is the concept of entity relationship diagramming. And in previous exams, I had a slightly different approach. In fact, last time I taught this class, the exam, you actually wrote some queries. And the exam, as you wrote, you had to write an entity relationship diagram, and then you had to take the entity relationship diagram and translate it into tables, and you had to specify foreign and primary and foreign keys and stuff. There was a lot of writing, there was a lot of drill, and you guys have already done all that. You did that in all of the assignments that you did for this course, and all the projects and stuff. So rather than doing that, I took a different approach. And so the questions that are all multiple choice are going to ask you things about cardinality in an entity relationship diagram. They're going to ask you about one-to-one, one-to-many. How is it broken out in terms of the table format and why it's done that way? How do those keys, where do those keys come from? You know, like when you take a many-to-many relationship and you make a composite, one key from this table, one key from that table, and you put it together. It's on the intricacies, whatever, on the details of what it is you're actually doing way beneath the surface. So I'm not asking you about, you know, how do you draw an entity relationship? You know, what's on an entity relationship diagram? entities, attributes, relationship. It's not going to be that surface level. Instead, what you've got is a couple of scenarios for which you're going to be asked questions about the model. And one in particular, one of the non-repeating ones, one of the unique one is on cardinality, actually. So, you know, and the concept of what the relationship is, you know, is it the same as cardinality? What does cardinality mean? What are those 1.1s and the 1.many's? And what is meant by many to many in terms of the concept? I'm also asking you about strong and weak entities and what happens with those weak entities, but more along the lines of things associated with the weak entity, keys that you would create with the weak entity, techniques for translating the weak entities into the table schemes. Oh, I gave you this right off the top here, the joins. I can't tell you anything more than know every single one of the joins. That's the best advice I can give you. Outer, natural, cross, inner. That's where you're gonna mess up if you don't know the joins. If you don't know the joins. And then know database constraints in terms of the concept as well. What do you mean by constraint? Requiring a primary key with a foreign key. The key selection process in terms of when you translate that entity relationship diagram into that set of tables. The meanings and the associations with the entity relationship diagram and how that does translate is important as a concept. I also ask you a couple of mean questions about normal forms. They're not surface level. I'm not going to ask you what does it mean if a database is in third normal form. I'm going to give you a problem associated with a second normal form. Look at the normal forms lecture that we went over and the problem that was associated with referential integrity and what was going on with that particular problem that we fixed when we put it into third normal form. There's at least 2 questions on that concept. We only had 1 lecture on normal forms, and it was in that lecture. All of the questions, by the way, come from the lectures, and when I get all done, I'll tell you which ones you can skip. But everything from the beginning all the way through about 8-ish. And I'll tell you, I'll remind you when we're all done now.
Any Boyne-Siko normal form? About the Boyne-Siko normal form?
I'm sorry?
Boyne-Siko normal form?
No, nothing about the B and C, F, B, C, and F, the Boynes or whatever.
Any conversions from second to third to Boyne-Siko?
No, you don't even have to know how to go from first to second to third, third to fourth. It's going to be issues with tables.
No conversions?
No conversions. No, you don't have to convert it. You don't have to look at something and tell me what normal form it's in. You don't have to do that either. It's going to be on database issues that are associated, that puts something, that creates a problem in terms of the normal form. Yeah? Oh.
Characteristics of good database design deals with the redundancy, something like that. Characteristics of
Nothing about the internet. Nothing about internet databases.
Assumptions of databases like redundancy.
Where do we see this?
Next
Oh,
Next question.
are you moving on already? Are you in a hurry? What are some characteristics of good database design?
4 assumptions of data.
Hold on one second. Let me refresh my memory on that one. Wow. Going back to a side note I forgot to mention on the queries. Group by having just as bad as the joins. Now I'll tell you, if you review that SQL bootcamp, all the questions are in there. So. Referential integrity. All right, going back to your question, characteristics of good data. That was just a generic. There's a couple of easy questions in terms of characteristics. Non-duplicate data, data that's reachable, findable, queryable, consistent, referential integrity issues. Hopefully that don't exist. There are a couple of questions that get into design of queries. I wouldn't call them efficiency comparisons, more result comparisons, where you have more than one way of doing something, so you're given a couple of different queries, and the results are slightly different. Because I didn't cover the performance, I didn't actually make it a performance question. So it's not going to have to do with performance. I'll give you a hint, it has to do with duplicate rows. You're going, the query is pretty nasty, but, you're given 4 different queries, and this is what makes the exam hard. You're given 4 different queries. All 4 queries are correct. One of them, or 2 of them, or 3 of them, or all 4 of them are going to produce duplicate rows. And you're asked A, B, C, or D, which combinations of which one of these queries is going to produce the duplicate, or not going to produce, either produce or not produce the duplicate rows. And the queries are not using distinct, it's not going to be that easy. They're not using something, that's going to eliminate the duplicate rows. And some of the queries you're going to look at, if your SQL background is not up to par, you're going to look at and go, is that a real query? Yes, every one of the queries is a functional query. There's nothing wrong with any of the queries. So that's not going to be like it's an invalid query. No, all the queries are going to be correct. It's the results of those queries that are going to have the confusion. There's also a question on the aggregates, the sum, the average, and using that in a query. Obviously, you could probably guess that one. You're going to get a single value, so you better make sure your comparison is going with an equal. If it's using an equals, it's going to be a single value that's going to be this compared to this. If it's an aggregate. The use of the aggregate. Some basic SQL questions on the language itself. Nothing on PL/SQL. Left that out completely. Mentioned before, the view concept is on here. I will tell you, actually I'll give you a hint. There's a view that's created, and then there's a query that's done on the view, and there's a join with the view. But the view is created by a join. And it's actually kind of an easy question compared to everything else. There's one self-join. Know what a self-join is, joining a table on a table. And the concept of aliasing. Alias. Beers B1 and beers B2, and you're querying the table on the table in terms, that's a self-join. Beers B1, beers B2, from beers B1, beers B2, and beer B1 dot. So referencing tables from different aliases, columns from different aliases of tables, which brings you into that. It brings you into that self-join kind of mode. Actually, the SQL. That's why I say start out with lecture. I think it's 5A. 5A. The SQL Plus Bootcamp 166 slides. That's your starting point. You got to know that lecture. In order to do well on the exam, in terms of the queries, everything that is on the exam, in terms of all the queries, comes out of that lecture. Let me just do a quick run through here before I tell you what else is not on here. Just to make sure I got everything that is on here. There's some logic questions in terms of what, given a table structure, how would you design the query in terms of what field you're going to query on for something, for a particular result or something. And as an example of that, knowing the difference between a count and a sum, you know, you're going to count the number of records. Are there duplicate records? It's going to give you a bad count, you know, versus if you're trying to find out unique instances of something. They create assertions on there with a check. So none of the check, the references. Foreign key, primary key. Hold on one second, let me just make sure. The concept of the candidate key is also on there, and that is a entity relationship diagramming type of question. So if you go through the entity relationship diagramming lecture as well, that's going to help you. Natural right outer join. Natural right outer join is written on the exam. Okay, so let me just make sure I haven't missed anything. Entity sets. The concept of the entity. Let's see. You're also given a couple of questions that are asked which one is going to produce an error. It's not an SQL syntax error. It's an error that's going to come out in the query. And you'd have to, in that particular case, you're looking at data types, you're looking at you know, different characteristics about the tables that you're given information on. I'm sorry? Oh. Oh, there is an Oracle question. Wow. The Oracle question. I'm going to have to take out, actually. I'm removing one of the questions. I can't give you that question because I didn't give you the material. It had to do, actually I'll read you the question. When you're developing advanced queries with Oracle database, which of the following where clauses makes use of the Oracle's ability to logically test the value against a set of results returned without explicitly knowing the set is before executing the query, but it's using a built-in column check on the table, which we didn't actually cover. So I'm pulling that question out, I'll substitute it in. And this is one of those odd questions that only showed up on this exam. So, as I mentioned before, if you were in the Java class, some of the questions are similar among all different forms, and some of them are unique for each form. And there's 4, for this particular class, there's 4 different forms that we're looking at. Well, that wasn't too bad. I'm glad I looked at that because then I could pull that question out. All right, so what's not on the exam? No entity relationship diagramming. There's nothing about the diagram, nothing about creating the diagram, nothing about just concepts in terms of what it's doing. How to convert the entity relationship into a table structure, what the entity relationship diagram shows, but nothing about the process in terms of, you know, the step-by-step translation of the diagram into the tables. It's just on the concept of translation. And the questions associated with that are obviously, you know, the biggest step is, you know, the easiest thing is figuring out which set of tables, which is easy, everything is a table. Entities return into tables, relationship turns into table. The hardest part is figuring out how you're going to design your keys. And the questions are associated with the key design. With if you're going to make a relationship into a table, which keys are you going to create out of that table, and where are they going to come from? If you know how to translate, it's a pretty easy question, actually. Review all lectures. I'll tell you where to stop, actually. In fact, I can take a few seconds and tell you right now where to stop. You want to stop with numbers, all the 7s. I think there's 2 7s. So 8, 9, 10, and 11 are optional. So let's see. I don't know. Let me check real quick to see if I have an internet access. No, I think I'm still down. But all the way through the 7s, the 8s you don't have to worry about, or the 8, 9, 10. I think I ran over 10A, actually. There aren't any questions, though, on JDBC. So there's no questions on JDBC, there's no questions on PLSQL, no questions about web access to databases, didn't even cover it, actually. Well, not that much. No questions on any of the Oracle reports, forms, didn't even really cover very much of that. Nothing on reporting tools, nothing on the SQL Plus window, the command line interface, or any of the other tools that are associated with Oracle that you may or may not have experimented with throughout the course. Majority of the questions are heavy SQL. It's just the way the exam turned out. So. In fact, the lecture that I was going to cover today was on performance. There's nothing on performance. And if you're interested in performance issues, it's lecture number 8 is going to give you performance in terms of efficiency and transaction management. But it's kind of like one of those odd topics of databases that I didn't feel was that really relevant. So, I know it seems like kind of a short review, but that is essentially the content. And now is your opportunity to ask questions about things I may not have mentioned yet in terms of what to expect. You can ask almost any question you want. Actually, you can ask any question that you want. And I can tell you yes or no, that's on the exam. No, that's not on the exam. You can also think about it a little bit and send me an email message and say, are triple upside down loops joins on the exam? Or no, that's nothing. I can say no, I've never heard of that. You could actually, go through, I would say go through the SQL lecture and you can probably figure out some of the harder stuff in that. That's the stuff that's on the exam. Subqueries. Basic concepts, but the questions themselves are getting at whether you actually understand the concept. So think of issues in databases. Think of different ways of configuring queries to get different results. What different queries produce. The use of a view, the use of checks on databases, the use of the keys, the concept and the methodology behind translating those entity relationship diagrams into tables, and the concept behind building the entity relationship diagram, and with a heavy focus on cardinality, multiplicity going on with that, which is pretty much the bulk. Questions?
What about an ODBC?
Nothing on ODBC. No questions on ODBC or JDBC.
No type questions, type 1, type 2, type 3,
Type what?
type 1, type 2, type 3,
Type?
type.
Tire?
Database
Tier?
Tier 1.
Oh, tier. No history of database design. No tier 1, tier 2. Nothing difference between relational and object-oriented. Nothing on object-oriented databases. Nothing on large binary objects. That's a good one. No questions on optimization either. That's a good. I probably should have put some in. Maybe. Nah. I'll substitute that one I'm pulling out with an easy one. Maybe it'll be more entity relationship question. Oh, no. No design, no ACID properties, no design related questions, no efficiency or performance related questions. It's a heavy-duty SQL exam is what it is. And I tell you, it's the luck of the draw. It depends on, I guess, what mood I'm in when I write the exam. Every exam comes out a little different. Last year's was all on entity relationship diagramming and translating them into tables. The whole exam was focused on that. This year, it ended up being all SQL. But you don't have to write any SQL queries, which some people actually find comfort in. So, and if you haven't noticed, the final exam schedule is also printed. If you don't like the 18th, which is next Monday, you can switch. You can go into one of the other time slots, send me an email message, and I can confirm. And you can take the exam whenever you want. We don't have a weekend version of this class, but if you want to take the exam on the weekend, I'm offering another exam this coming up weekend. Or you could also take it April 30th and May 1st. If you haven't been around and haven't heard the latest news, you're allowed to skip at least one project that's 10 points, or, big or, 2 of the 5-point assignments. So you get 10 points extra credit if you did everything. If you did all 4 projects and 6 assignments, you'd end up with 10 additional points. That will give you a higher percentage in the course if you don't do so well on the final. However, the final will be adjusted. So if everyone doesn't do well, I'm not saying you're not going to. I think most of you, hearing this now, you'll actually look at the lecture and you'll be prepared for it, is what's going to happen, actually. And now you're not going to get so many complaints. See, if I didn't tell you what I told you, then you'd be, oh, no problem. You get there, well, there's no questions on entity relationship diagramming. No more questions on translating the tables. What is this? It's all SQL. When you're going to tell me to do all these, you're going to test every one of the joins, or the views, or the this or the that. But now, see, now you'll look at that SQL lecture though. So, and then when you come in, you'll still be, slightly like, I don't know. But it's only 20 questions, so, and it's multiple choice, so you can always guess. I guess is what I'm saying. But that's not a good way to study. So. But all assignments are due on the 9th. We don't have a midterm for this course, so you don't have to worry about that. The CSLO is due at the end of the course on the 9th. Projects, assignments are due on the 9th. Questions? Questions about what's going to be on the exam? See, I always ask this and nobody asks. This is your opportunity, though, because I'll answer anything.
Anything from the mini lectures?
Nothing from the Oracle Essentials. Nothing from the mini lectures. Good question. You always ask the good questions. Because you're the one who's going to study for it. That's what it is. You're trying to minimize your study efforts, which is good. That's what I would do. But no, none of the Oracle Essentials. Those are only put up there for one of the assignments that needed them. I didn't cover those in the class. I'm not going to cover them. Same is true for lecture 8, 9, 10, 11, whatever. Anything past 7. What else do you need to know? It's not related. There's no Oracle questions, so you don't have to worry about whether you had 10G or 11G or whatever you used in the course, or any features that are related to Oracle, particularly specific to Oracle. You don't have to worry about that. Normalization is covered though, so you want to look into that. Designing. It's mostly designing, querying, and issues that might come up. No notes, closed book, closed neighbor, yeah?
CSLOs has to be sent to the...
CSLOs are not sent to the TAs anymore. They're uploaded directly into the ITU EMS. And I wouldn't wait until the very last week of class to do any of this. In fact, I would actually start doing it now. If you have anything ready, put it up. Because I guarantee you, I should probably take a pool. I was going to say bet, but that's illegal to gamble like that. So, and I'm being recorded, so. I would almost put my money on it though if there were a pool. If I were betting on this, I would say that EMS is going to go down. Usually the last week of April. And they'll be down for like 3 or 4 days straight. That's just a guess. That's just a guess. And you guys are going to be pleasantly surprised when you see the exam. You're going to go, oh, this is easy. I guessed that one too. Well, because if I just told you what would have made it hard. So you already know what to study. Any other questions? And after next week, we don't have class. That's the end of the course. This is the last day of the course, of the lecture part of the course. And your last time to get attendance if you haven't signed the attendance roster. And your last time to contribute to the ITU Cares. No, what's
Dealing for healing.
Dealing for healing.
That's for the last month, right? What about the yesterday's table?
Yesterday's what?
Yesterday they had another 7.0.
Yeah, which earthquake is this going for? The first one or the second one?
No.
Yeah, we have to say it's
For the latest one.
For the latest earthquake relief efforts. That's a good question. Now, which one is this actually going for? All right. Well, if we don't have any questions, we get out early today because I've run out of material because I didn't put it on the final. I know some of you are clapping. See, next term I'm going to adjust the classes around the bus schedule, actually. Yeah, I know you guys have a bus at 6. Yeah. All right, we're done, unless you have questions. If you still have questions, I am available by email, obviously. You can also show up and ask me questions. After you start digging into the lectures, you might want to know if this is available or if that's available or something of that nature, or if that's going to be on the exam. All right, bye. See you next time. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.